It is Thursday night at 7:30. My name is Geno D'Angelo. I'm a local Northern Michigan real estate agent, and every Thursday at 7, typically today at 7:30, I'll get to that in a little bit. I come on and talk to you about lifestyle, housing, answer your questions, just to have a live interactive conversation. I'm here to answer any questions you might have. Uh, just want to make this the best hour of your week if that's possible. I appreciate you accommodating, excuse me, my schedule change. For as long as I've been doing these, my time has been Thursday at 7 p.m. And this week I had to push it back. And I don't know if this is going to be something we just do going forward. But my son started football this week and his practices are 5:30 to 7, which makes it hard to stay till the end of his practice and make it to the studio in time to hop on here with you guys. So as of right now, he's allowing me to come to his practices. My guess is that might change in the near future and he won't let me come to the practice anymore. So for as of now, we're going to switch to 7:30 on Thursday. So half hour later, maybe to push your bedtime back a little bit, but I appreciate you coming on and joining me. I've actually really grown to love these lives. Every Sunday at 1:00, we put out a new video that has something to do with, comparing, contrasting what it's like lifestyle pros and cons to living in Northern Michigan as an attempt to help you, the audience, become a more educated home buyer in Northern Michigan, or if you're in Northern Michigan and debating if you're going to stay or not. Hopefully these videos add a little bit of clarity to that decision. So again, thank you so much. We're going to be talking about everything you need to know when buying up north and how it is different than some other areas. We've gone through the summer. We've helped a lot of people relocate here. A lot of them have come from these videos. And we've compiled a list of questions of things that always come up. And as somebody who's sold real estate in Northern Michigan for their entire life, for half of their life, a lot of these are just second nature. I guess I just assume this is how it is everywhere. But there are definitely some differences in buying a home in Northern Michigan versus buying a home in other places. So we're going to talk about that tonight. I always like to give a little bit of a weather update when I hop on here. It's also, as always, drop a comment below. Let me know where you're watching. So here's the 5-day or the 10-day forecast. I always love to give the weather because I did it one time and everybody asked me to start doing it again. So let me share the screen with you. Give you the 10-day weather forecast up north. In case you're thinking about it, looks like we got a great stretch of weather coming up. 80s, low 70s. It definitely feels like spring. That fall is starting to creep in a little bit. The weather is definitely getting cooler. And I don't know about you. I'm ready to enjoy the last bit of summer and then go right into the fall season. I think fall, as I've talked about a million times, fall is one of the most underrated seasons in Northern Michigan. So again, drop a comment. Let me know where you're watching from. If something comes up tonight and you want to have a conversation or a question or something you saw in the news, or do you want to talk about interest rates or tariffs or what Trump's going to do for the whatever, we can talk about whatever you want to talk about. I'm fairly confident in terms of Northern Michigan real estate, there's probably not a topic that I can't handle off the cuff in addition to what we have planned for tonight. So as always, thank you for watching. This is going to be good. So why buying up north is different. There's some things on here that you're probably expecting. There might be some things on here that you're not expecting. When I compiled this list, when I sat down a couple of days ago to prepare for this live, I went deep in the memory bank to think of things that have happened over the last, year or 2 years that I think will be interesting to talk about. So this one just came up. One of the unique challenges, there's a couple of unique challenges. Seasonal access roads that might not be plowed in the winter. As more and more people relocate to Northern Michigan full-time and make Northern Michigan their primary residence, some of these areas that used to only be, typically used seasonally, or roads that weren't maintained year-round, this is becoming an issue. So if you relocate to Northern Michigan, make sure the road that you're relocating to is maintained in the wintertime. And I know that's sort of goofy and goes without saying, but we've had a couple, we have a lot of private roads here. We've got a lot of interesting road ownership arrangements, and you just want to make sure who's maintaining the road. A lot of times it's the county. Sometimes you have, again, a private road agreement that spells out who's maintaining the road, when and why and how. And you just want to make sure you have that clear from the beginning. We've dealt with this lately as we've been selling a few waterfront homes. Waterfront zoning restrictions and setbacks. Every lake's a little bit different. Every township's a little bit different. And not even just on the waterfront. if you're planning to build or construct something on the property that's not already there, make sure you check with zoning to make sure that you're adhering to the setbacks. If it's waterfront, finding out how far from the high water mark you have to build, what your building envelope looks like. Those are things that, if you're not from here, you're not used to being in an area like this that has waterfront, that sort of thing. Definitely something you need to consider. Want to make sure that whatever you buy the property for, whatever your use is, that you can certainly do that, or make sure you can do that before you actually close on the property. Septic and well inspections and how winter weather impacts them. A septic inspection in the winter can be hard if they can't get to the if they can't get to the lid of the septic tank because there's 3 feet of snow. It definitely creates a challenge. And I'll be honest, home inspections in general in the winter create a little bit of a challenge because there's just, you can't, oftentimes there's a lot of snow, so you can't see the roof, you can't get to the septic. Inspecting the well, usually you're okay in the wintertime. If you do a water test, that doesn't really affect. If they're going to test, one of the ways they test the well is they open up all of the spigots in the well. I'm sorry, not the spigots, all the faucets in the house, and they put the well under stress to see how it reacts. And that's a really good way to test the well. And that is definitely something they can still do in the wintertime. So home inspections in the winter themselves can be tricky. I'll never forget, I sold a house to somebody in the end of winter, beginning of spring, and they put the house under contract. The inspector couldn't see the roof because it was snow covered during the time. And this was, believe it or not, this was still inside their inspection window. We had a thought enough that they could see that the house needed a new roof. So in a game of inches, that, having the ability to see the roof a week later, actually, and they ended up negotiating for a new roof. So that saved them $20,000. And I often think, and this was a while ago now, but I often think about that story. If they would have, bought the house or had their inspection a week earlier, they may never have saw this. Oh, and it was a bank foreclosure, so that nobody knew. It wasn't like the sellers were hiding it. But that should date the story that's how long ago it was, because we still had bank foreclosures back then. This is what I'm dealing with often: availability of contractors and inspectors during peak season. We keep hearing how tough the market is and sales are down and units are down, but I've never had as hard of time as I have in the last month getting home inspectors to the houses and then getting appraisers to the houses. And it's really made me stop and think, is this, are a lot of deals falling apart? What is causing our sales to be slow, but these vendors to be, as booked up as they've ever been? So I think a percentage of it is maybe a few more deals are falling apart. So they're actually going through the process, but not actually closing. So they're not being, they're not showing up in the close data. Also, this is sort of the peak of summer in Northern Michigan, and kids are about to go back to school. And if you want to take a summer vacation, this is the time. So I think there's a little bit of that built into the scheduling snafus. Here's a couple. So these are unique challenges. I also want to go over the benefits, because I think there's a lot of benefits to living in Northern Michigan that a lot of people don't think of. Of course, the 4 seasons, we talk about the weather often. There are a lot of great reasons to, relocate to Northern Michigan, or even buy a house part-time here, which is what most people do. Strong sense of community in smaller towns. I've had a lot of people tell me that they bought in Northern Michigan wondering if they were going to be welcomed or not, or just really curious how the locals were going to perceive them. And a lot of them told me they could not have felt more welcome than they do now. And it didn't take much for them to actually feel like they belonged in Northern Michigan. And I say this often, there's so many different organizations and groups and things you could do to get involved in the community, whether it's, volunteer, whether it's join a pickleball league, whether it's go to a yoga class or some kind of exercise class. There's just so many different things to get involved in. And I was at my son's football practice tonight and I actually noticed in the crowd of parents that were watching, I know this person from real estate. I know this person from CrossFit. I know this person because I see him at the grain train. And it doesn't take long. And I've been here for a long time. I understand that, but it doesn't take long for, and I've seen it with my clients, that people that, moved here a year ago, when you see them on social media, it seems like they've been here forever. So having a strong sense of community is definitely one of the benefits of living in Northern Michigan that you may not be thinking of. This one I talk about a lot, so I want to talk about it again: year-round recreational opportunities. I like the winter. Before, if you've been watching me for a while, before I redid the studio, I used to have a snowboard behind me. It's actually in the other corner across from me now because I didn't have a better place for it. I think the way to make Northern Michigan work for you is to find something to do all 4 seasons. Summer, you're not going to have to worry about it because chances are summer's what brought you here in the first place, and you already know how to handle summer. Fall is an extension of summer in some ways. It's an extension of summer and a good time to sort of recharge and relax and get ready for winter. That winter hobby, in my opinion, is key. I like to snowboard growing up. My son skis growing up. I snowmobile. I think that if you're going to be here year round, I think finding that winter recreation is super important because even as much as I like to be outside and hit up Boyne Highlands and snowboard and ski with my friends, that and the February March stretch is still hard, and you want to push that. You want to push the dog days of winter as far out as possible. So that's definitely a piece of advice. And look, there's a lot of things. You don't have to ski. You don't have to snowmobile. Maybe you can ice fish. Maybe you can snowshoe. There really are a lot of recreational opportunities in northern Michigan in the wintertime. And, look, and it can be an inside thing. It can be, you like to puzzle or you like to craft or knit or read books. It doesn't have to be, something elaborate or drastic, but, having a plan to get through those winter months when it's, 10 degrees and we get a foot of snow every day and you haven't seen the sun in 3 months. It is crucial to have a plan to get through that. This is a benefit. Northern Michigan specifically recently has seen a rapid increase in property value appreciations. Now, will that stay this way forever? Is this just a blip on the radar? Anybody could, anybody's guess is as good as mine. What I will say is in my opinion, and if you disagree with me, drop a comment, or if you're watching live, drop a comment now. If you're watching the replay, drop a comment and I'll answer it later. I feel like right now is the most affordable time to buy a house in northern Michigan that we're going to see, that we've seen for a long time, and that we're going to see for a long time. I'm starting to hear news, and I don't know if this is true or not, that they're talking about doing 4 rate cuts this year. Who knows how that'll affect the mortgage market? I think in some ways, I've had a couple of people come up to me and talk about the perceived 4 rate cuts. I think just hearing that is giving people a little bit more assurance that everything's going to be okay. Because if you've been in northern Michigan or if you've been in Michigan or around the country, the market has been a little bit tough this year. There's still a small geez, of few pocket areas. Like we've had a couple listings go highest and best. We've had a couple of our own listings go high and best. We've negotiated for our buyers and helped them get deals done on highest and best. But that's a very small sector of the overall market right now. And a lot of properties are lagging. Yesterday in the MLS, there was 25 price cuts. I looked at the pending list. That's usually around 180. I'm sorry, that's usually around like 220. It's at like 180 right now. So that's a pretty big difference. I think it'll definitely be interesting to see what this fall brings. And I've got a video coming up of what to predict this fall, but I think this fall is going to be one of the more interesting times in northern Michigan real estate, because I have a feeling if you're a buyer, the price you're going to see, I think we're going to see a lot of, let me take a deep breath and take a step back. There's starting to become a lot of inventory on the market. And a couple of things. One, I think if interest rates drop, that's going to cause even more inventory to come on the market, because suddenly people that wanted to buy or wanted to change houses that weren't, because they have a 2, 3, 4% interest rate, they didn't want to jump from that to 7, might be willing to jump from 2, 3, 4 to 5.5 if we get that low, which I don't know if we're going to get that low, but just speaking hypothetically. So I think inventory increasing, causing prices to come down a little bit, mixed with interest rates being lowered, is going to create the perfect storm of buyers coming out of the woodwork for however long that lasts. I'm genuinely curious. It seems like we went from the COVID market right into one of the tougher markets I've ever seen. And it would be nice if we could somehow find an equilibrium where the market was kind of how it used to be, more even keel than these wild swings. Now, northern Michigan doesn't have the same wild swings that other areas have. I looked at some markets around the country that are constantly just swinging. It's like a pendulum swinging back and forth. And until recently, northern Michigan hadn't really been like that. So I'm definitely hoping that it stays it finds its balance again. Unique architectural styles, from the classic lake cottages to the mushroom houses to the Victorian houses. There are so many different types of architectural styles in northern Michigan, which I always say there's something for everyone here. As long as you can put up with what Northern Michigan has to offer. I think the different architectural styles also account for that. We're starting to see a lot of modern houses up here. We haven't seen modern houses for a long time or ever. It's definitely interesting to drive around and see just how many different types of architectural houses there are here in Northern Michigan. If you're tuning in late, my name is Geno D'Angelo. I'm a local Northern Michigan real estate agent. If you're not familiar with our channel, I create content around the lifestyle in Northern Michigan, buying or selling a house in Northern Michigan, and just overall what it's like to live here. This is meant to be interactive. So if you have a question about anything Northern Michigan related, I'll do my best to answer it. Just drop it in the comment. If you're watching the replay, also drop your questions in the comment and I'll be sure to answer those as well. Also, if you're not yet subscribed to the channel, it would mean the world to me if you do so. I just crossed 1,900 subscribers. Can you believe that? I remember back in the day when we were at like 2,500, and I remember getting to 100 and then 500. And then I remember we got to, we had a video blow up and it jumped us from like 700 to 1,000 in like a week. And now we're closing in on 2,000 and couldn't do this without you. I know a lot of people watch these videos every week and I really appreciate it. So if you're watching and you're not yet subscribed, it'd mean the world to me if you would do so. There's a big team behind these videos. It's not just me. There's a lot of people that put effort into the editing and the studio and the helping me with scripts and doing research. So it means as much to them as it does to me. If you know of anybody who's interested in Northern Michigan, whether it's just interested in what's going on in Northern Michigan, maybe they already live here, they're thinking about relocating here, feel free to share these videos with them and hopefully they find some value in them as well. Choosing the right location. I often talk about when I get a buyer that calls me about relocating to Northern Michigan, I often start with, what do you like to do? What's bringing you to Northern Michigan? If you're reluctantly coming here because you got a job, I understand that's how it goes sometimes, but what do you like to do? And then we work backwards. If you want to be away from everybody, I've got a spot for you. If you want to be walking distance to downtown, I've got a spot for you. If you want to be walking distance to the water, we can find that spot as well. If you want to be in a golf course community, if you want to be in a yacht club community or somewhere in between, there is literally something for everyone. And I feel if you're watching this because your boss is forcing you to move to Northern Michigan, or you've decided you want to work from home from Northern Michigan, start with your lifestyle in mind. And that is a great way to determine where you should begin to look. Let's face it, there's a lot of, if you're watching this because you're thinking about buying a vacation home in Northern Michigan, which is what made Northern Michigan popular in the first place, there are so many different varieties of vacation homes in Northern Michigan. We all talk about the waterfront homes or the water view homes, but did you know there's actually tons of condos and houses in Northern Michigan that you can ski in and ski out of, meaning you put your skis on, you leave your house, you come back, you take your skis off. You don't have to get in the car and pack everybody up and drive to the ski resorts. There's houses, there's developments with deeded access where you actually don't own a house on, you don't own the waterfront, but you have access to put a dock out there. There's so many different varieties of houses in Northern Michigan, whether you're here full time, whether you're relocating here, whether you've decided you want to work remotely here, or you just want to buy a vacation home and spend a few months out of the year here. There are so many different varieties of lifestyle here. One thing that I think another thing that really draws people to Northern Michigan are the walkable communities, meaning whether it's Harbor Springs, Petoskey, Indian River, Boyne City, Gaylord in some places. We have so many walkable communities here. And as the world trends towards being interested in a more active lifestyle, I think this is really an area that suits Northern Michigan because I see so many people on a day-to-day basis walking from their house downtown Petoskey into the downtown. And, being able to walk from your home to have a nice dinner downtown in Cafe Sante in Boyne City or Chandler's in Petoskey, that is another benefit of the lifestyle of living in Northern Michigan. We're going to talk about town. I added this late and I had this idea when I was driving in the car and I decided I would try it out. So we're going to do the town by town pros and cons. So let's start with Petoskey. Great schools, sort of a cultural hub. They've got the Crooked Tree Art Center. They've got the Great Lakes Center for the Arts. There's a couple of cultural restaurants, restaurants here that you don't find everywhere. Petoskey is sort of like the hub of Northern Michigan. I would say between Petoskey and Traverse City, those are sort of like the capitals of Northern Michigan, if that makes sense. Not officially, but sort of unofficially. The cons of living in Petoskey probably goes without saying the higher prices. This is probably the most expensive market in the entire state if you compare median income to median home sale price. A while back, I did a study just on my own, just with my laptop and some free time on my hands, and I looked at what prompted this was somebody posted the average sale price in Rochester Hills, Michigan, which I have a connection to Rochester Hills because that's where I went to college. I still visit there often. I've got a friend that has a house there. I'm down there often. I think Rochester Hills is one of the cooler places to live in Metro Detroit. And they said the average sale there was at the time 550,000, give or take. And I remembered that I had noticed that the average sale in Petoskey was $550,000 at the time. So I thought that's interesting that Petoskey is just as expensive as Rochester Hills, Michigan. And Rochester, if you're not familiar, Rochester Hills, Michigan is a very high-end area. Eminem has a house there. A lot of the Pistons, when they played in Auburn Hills, which was nearby, used to live there. Very high-end area. The median income in Rochester Hills was like $110,000. The median income in Petoskey is like $60,000. Now, you're probably wondering, how can you have an area that has a median home price of 550,000 with the median income of 60 some thousand? And that's simple. Most of the people that live in Petoskey don't live in Petoskey full time, meaning they don't work in Petoskey. And that really skews the data, because it's interesting that a market that just does not have a market that has the same median sale price as a market that has a median income of over $100,000 is as much of an oxymoron as you could think of. But I definitely thought that was an interesting study. So Petoskey, walkable community, close to the ski hills, close to the water. We've got Walloon, Bay Harbor, some very nice areas, but the houses are just expensive compared to the job market. Now, if you're moving here and you don't care about the job market, or you're bringing your job with you, or you're coming here to work at the hospital, maybe you're a physician, then you're going to love Petoskey. And I would say, as long as you can afford to live here, you're going to love it. And that's sort of, the only caveat I have to add to that. Next up is Charlevoix. I actually like Charlevoix. I didn't always like Charlevoix, but I've been spending more time there, and it's actually starting to grow on me. They have a scenic waterfront, meaning what's cool about Charlevoix is when you drive, the good news, bad news about Charlevoix is their main street runs along the water, but it's also the only real way in and out of Charlevoix. So that creates some congestion in the summertime. Definitely this summer, it seems like. And not to mention, they have a bridge that goes up to let the boats in from Lake Michigan into Round Lake. That also creates a little bit of a conundrum. They have a very strong tourism season. And they've got some great events there. They've got the Venetian, which is one of the highlights of summer for a lot of people. They've got the Apple Fest in October, which is one of my favorite under the radar events. They do a great job with a multitude of events. They've got a marathon they do there. They've got a bunch of 5Ks. They've got a mile run. They've got a bunch of stuff going on. The downside of Charlevoix is just how seasonal it is, meaning it gets super seasonal, super busy in the summer, and super quiet in the winter. And a couple of years ago, the Petoskey News Review did an article about the biggest disparity in home values. And they use Charlevoix as an example. And there's actually a street in Charlevoix where there's like a $20 million house on the water on one side, and across the street, there's like an $80,000 house. Not that that's good, bad, right, or wrong. That's just a fact of Charlevoix. And if you like boating, you're going to love Charlevoix. Round Lake, Lake Charlevoix, the big water. Lake Charlevoix is really a boater's dream, and they've really catered that town to the boating population, which I think is great. And they've got some great restaurants there. If you haven't been to Charlevoix in a while, I know the people that are from there, they have the CVX stickers on their cars, and that's a very tight-knit community. Harbor Springs. Harbor Springs is the quintessential storybook luxury resort market, and I just think it's great. I spent a lot of time in Harbor Springs this summer with clients and just hanging out. And one of my favorite things to do is drive on the wheelway from Petoskey to Harbor Springs. That's a short trip. It's a lot of fun. They're building beautiful houses there. If you're familiar with Harbor Springs, if you're interested in buying in Harbor Springs, we certainly love to help you, because there's a lot of development going on in that town. And it was busy this year. What I think is really cool about Harbor Springs is it's the quintessential resort market, meaning they've got the beautiful water, they've got the beautiful homes, the beautiful boats, the nice cars. And in the wintertime, they're close to the ski hills. So I think there's no better four-season community in northern Michigan than Harbor Springs. You've got boating and just everything Harbor Springs has to offer in the summertime Then you go right in from the summer into the fall where you've got the tunnel of trees, you've got Pond Hill Farm. Harbor Springs definitely shines in the fall season. Then in the winter, you've got skiing, spring, the golf courses open back up, and you've completed your year. So if you're looking for four seasons fun, you've got a little bit of a bigger budget, definitely consider Harbor Springs. Traverse City, year-round economy, bigger job market, but much busier traffic. That is one thing. Traverse City is an anomaly in northern Michigan because what I like for Traverse City is if you want to move up north, but you're not ready to give up all the conveniences and you still want the same energy of the bigger cities, I think Traverse City does a really good job with that. It's gotten very busy. There seems like there's always some kind of road construction going in and out of Traverse City. But I will say, if you're relocating to northern Michigan and the job market is important to you, or you're coming here to look for a job, or you're looking for the more young professional crowd, I think that Traverse City would probably be worth looking at for you. We often have, it hasn't happened so much this year now that we're talking about it, but it seemed like last year, everybody that was relocating to northern Michigan spent a day in Traverse City and a day in Petoskey to pick which one of those. Look, maybe my videos are helping and they don't have to spend time because they're watching the videos and helping decide ahead of time. But yeah, Traverse City is there's a lot going on there. There's a ton of development. I think actually the amount of development, Traverse City, we did a video on this a couple months ago, but Traverse City is the only market this year that has had more units sell this year than last year. Across the board, everybody else in northern Michigan, every other town in northern Michigan has had less units sell this year than they had last year. And I don't know, I can't figure this out until the end of the year, but I have a suspicion that the reason that is they built so much inventory. That's the only market in northern Michigan that is adding new houses, meaning new inventory to the market. And I think that's what's allowing them to continue growing, to continue selling more units this year than they did last year. Now let's talk about another fun one, Northern Michigan quirks. Northern Michigan quirks, well and septic loan requirements. There are some types of loans that do require you to get a water quality test, and there's some kind of loans, whether it's FHA or VA, that include additional inspections. So that's a little bit of a quirk. Financing vacation homes or second homes. The guidelines to finance second homes or vacation homes are a lot different than financing your primary residence. And the reason for that is there's more risk. If somebody hits financial hardship, they're more likely to let their second home go than their primary residence. So that is definitely something to keep into consideration if you're thinking about buying a second home in northern Michigan. Budgeting tips. Property taxes vary by township and school district. One of the first resources I give my buyers when they're thinking about relocating to northern Michigan is I tell them Google State of Michigan property tax estimator. And that is a very good way to determine what the value of your taxes, what the amount of your taxes are going to be. And fun fact, pro tip, if you're building a budget, if you're budget conscious about buying your house in northern Michigan, I would tell you this: make sure you're looking at the property taxes based on the value of the home you're going to pay, not the current value of the home. Because when you buy a home in Michigan, the property becomes what's called uncapped, meaning the value is uncapped and it's not supposed to follow the sale price, and it almost never does, but it is very likely going to go up from unless the person just bought the house a couple of years ago, the person you're buying the house from, that property tax, that taxable value is going to go up. Meaning if you go on the website and look up what they're paying for taxes now, and you assume that's what you're going to pay for taxes, that is likely not going to be the case. Another issue that we've run into a couple of times are seasonal maintenance costs, meaning people move here and they don't realize, how much money they're going to spend having their driveway plowed, depending on the winter, or their grass cut, or putting the dock in or out. That is something we can definitely help you with. And again, if you're trying to build a budget and you're extremely budget conscious and you want to know every expense, which is I'm perfectly happy helping you with, let us know and we can make sure that, look, you're not thinking about this expense or you're not thinking about that expense, and definitely make your home buying experience a little bit easier. HOA fees for waterfront condos or homes in general. A lot of condos, all condos in this area have HOA fees. Some are extremely expensive and you get a lot of amenities, and some are not very expensive and you don't get that many amenities. So every time we write an offer, we have a section where you're able to review the bylaws. That way, you know exactly what you're getting into. You can make sure that the association is in a strong financial position, meaning there's no upcoming assessments or anything you have to worry about in that aspect. As we get a little bit further into these, let me know, are there anything that if you're watching this because you live in Northern Michigan currently, or you spent a lot of time here, is there anything that has surprised you about living in Northern Michigan? Again, whether you're watching this live or the replay, let me know if there's anything that surprises you about living in Northern Michigan. We've got a couple more to get in over here tonight. If there's something on your mind, whether you're watching it live or the replay, that you'd like to learn more about, drop a comment. We can certainly have a conversation. Some of the most valuable lives we've ever done is because somebody asked a question and two or three people said, "Hey, I was thinking about that." And suddenly we had this long conversation about something completely off topic. And that's why I do these. That's why I come on live. That way I can tell you exactly, help you, educate you on exactly what is going on in Northern Michigan. House hunting tips. A lot of the buyers that we help, most of the buyers we help are not in Northern Michigan right now. What we do to give them the best advantage, because when a house comes on the market, not as much now as it used to be, but still in some instances, it's competitive. We actually just got a house under contract about a week ago for a client who was not here. He went out and highest and best. And I felt like our process of helping him do that really gave him an advantage. Using virtual tours effectively. So when you call us and you want to see a property virtually because it just came on the market and you're not able to make it to Northern Michigan, we walk through and do a FaceTime or Zoom or however you want to do it. Or if you're not available, we record the videos, put them in a folder, email them to you. I also have a really cool Insta360 camera. So I put it, 20 feet in the air. So it shows the roof, it shows everything surrounding. We try to give you the best showing experience if you're not able to be here live in person. Because a lot of times, whether we like it or not, you have to make this decision without actually seeing the house. And I feel that being able to see the house, understand the house as much as possible prior to coming see it is important. If you're thinking about relocating to Northern Michigan and you're not in a hurry, say you're a year out or 2 years out, or maybe even longer, and you're going to live here full time, or you believe you're going to live here full time, I would tell you to visit here during multiple seasons. A lot of people have, and some have regretted it. A lot of people have bought houses in Northern Michigan to live in full time after only being here during the summer, which is fine. But the summer is only about 100 days out of the 365 days a year. So I want to make sure you enjoy the other 265 days a year, because I would rather not sell you a home than sell you a home that you end up hating later, because life is too short. Where you live matters. And I don't want to have anybody to have any regrets. Here are some red flags that I've spotted over the years. Ice damage on ice damage on roofs, meaning if there was an ice dam that caused a leak or something like that, that is definitely something to pay attention to. Always look for moisture issues in the basement of the crawl space. That's a really good reason to look in the spring, because if you look in the spring, that's when water levels are the highest. There's a lot of thaw, and you're going to see what happens to the water. One of the biggest, I almost hit my mic talking with my hands. One of the biggest, I guess one of my biggest nemesis when we talk about houses is water, specifically water that freezes. And we have a lot of that in Northern Michigan. So you want to make sure the roof is sound, the foundation is sound, those things are sound. So that way, when the water thaws or we get a little bit of the water freezes, that nothing bad happens to your house. Again, we talked about this earlier, but I wanted to mention again, properties with no year-round access, meaning you can't get to the properties year-round. Somebody asked me, it was the same client that we were trying to get this house, trying to get the house for him when it was the highest and best, and he was not here. What makes a strong offer? A couple of things. A lot of times people think that the price is the only thing the seller cares about. And honestly, most sellers, that's the truth. Most sellers just want the most amount of money they can possibly get. However, not every seller is tied only to the financial part of the equation. Having a flexible timeline for closing, meaning you can either close quickly or you can wait to let them do whatever they need to do in their life and then close. Writing an offer with minimal contingencies also makes your offer a little bit stronger. inspection, appraisal, mortgage, those things are fine. When you start adding a bunch of different contingencies, such as home sale or that sort of thing, that is definitely when it gets a little bit trickier. So, that is something we'll work you through on a case by case basis to make sure you're writing the most compelling offers possible. The next one, my friend Ian, if he's still on, is going to love using a local lender. Of course, we love Ian with One Trust Home Loans. Geez, there's a lot of great lenders in Northern Michigan. I don't care who you use. There's a lot of intricacies about Northern Michigan, meaning a lot of people, finding an appraiser here is a big deal. So a lot of the local banks have contacts with local appraisers. I can't tell you how many out of area lenders have tried to do deals here, and 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks into the process have said, hey, we don't have an appraiser in that area, or they send an appraiser in from 2 hours away, and it sort of just creates a mess. So whether it's our friend Ian or one of the other great local lenders, I think it's important to use a local lender when talking about Northern Michigan. There's a little bit of controversy around this one. Writing a personal letter to the seller. We actually had a seller that did take an offer because of the letter that the buyers had written. And again, I think that is important to know. I'm not always a fan of them. If it's something you feel compelled to do, it might make a difference. It might not make a difference. So again, that's just a personal preference. Escalation clauses, still popular. Offering to cover an appraisal gap is even more popular, meaning you're willing to you're going to buy the house even if it doesn't appraise at exactly what the purchase price is. Now, we haven't had any appraisal issues in a very long time, so that's not something we're terribly worried about, but it does give the seller a little bit of confidence if you don't have to worry about having the house appraised. Ian says it blew my mind moving from overlook to TC, how much different the process here as it pertains to getting loans closed. Ian, weigh in a little bit. What is the main difference? So Ian is a lender that we use all the time. If you watch the channel, he's a good friend of mine. Again, you don't have to use Ian. What I like about Ian is I know what I'm going to get. I know what you're going to get, and sometimes that's important. Ian was a lender in Metro Detroit and is also a lender in Northern Michigan. So I'm curious what he says the difference is. So I'm going to keep going while he hopefully types. Something to consider when you're talking about inspections and appraisal. We mentioned this earlier. There's certain things you can't do in the wintertime as far as inspections. You can still get a pretty good inspection, but I'm going to be honest, it's a lot more difficult in the wintertime. We don't sell as many homes in the wintertime, so it's not as big of a deal, but it's definitely something to consider. Some add-ons that you can do if you're doing a home inspection, some add-ons you can focus on: radon testing, water quality testing, dock seawall inspections, mold inspections. I think when you're buying a house, it's a huge financial investment, and you should do every inspection that you feel comfortable with, meaning that's not the time to save money on, saving a few $100 there. You should make sure the house is in the best condition possible for your family. This is a kind of a pro tip. We often get people who, write an offer, get it accepted, do the inspection, and then something comes up and they want to negotiate. It's in my opinion, if a $5,000 repair comes up, lowering the price $5,000 on a mortgage deal changes just about nothing in your monthly payment. So I think it's better to actually ask the seller to give you a credit at closing, because then you get the actual cash in your pocket. Now, yes, you do have to pay a little bit more interest on that $5,000 versus reducing the price. But I think having money in your pocket during that time is almost a little bit more important. Ian said the difference is the nuances, like having built out appraisal panels and inspectors for things like water tests and foundation certifications. Even working with out of town title companies becomes cumbersome. I guess knowing who and where to go would make our job. Yeah, that's 100% true. A lot of areas, and that sort of thing, going back to when you're dealing with an out of town lender that's not familiar with Northern Michigan, they're probably not used to. If you're from Metro Detroit or Grand Rapids or Chicago or wherever, any area bigger than Northern Michigan, you're probably not used to having a hard time finding an appraiser to appraise a house for a loan. That is definitely something that is specific to Northern Michigan, and definitely something worth noting. Speaking of appraisals, that is also something that's interesting about Northern Michigan. Is oftentimes, whether it's an appraisal or whether it's myself or another agent doing a market analysis, it is very hard to find comps. Now, if you live in one of the few big subdivisions around, it's a little easier to find comparable sales. Or if you live in Birchwood or Bay Harbor, Country Club Hills, those areas are downtown Petoskey. Those areas are easier to find comps. Something we have to deal with a lot in Northern Michigan is adjusting, meaning you take a house, you find a list of comps, and you adjust the house to match those, or adjust the comps to match that house and see what value it spits out. What about Rick Burke says, what about inspections on condos in competitive situations when most likely anything major would be covered? That's actually a great look. This is why I like to do the lives, because this is a great point. When you own a condo, you own from the paint in, meaning you don't own the walls, you don't own, the roof, you don't own the foundation, you own from the paint in, meaning you're not going to inspect the roof, you're not going to inspect the foundation, you're not going to inspect much. I would probably buy a house. I would look at the HOA. Okay, this is what I would do. If I was buying a condo and it was competitive, I would look at the HOA's budget. I would look at, sort of how the property feels, what it looks like, how old it is. I would probably be okay not doing an inspection, because the furnace is probably going to be okay. The air conditioner is probably going to be okay. The water probably works. The HOA is going to cover most of what's wrong with that property. So yeah, look, I've bought, when we were back when the market was a little bit different, we were investing, I used to buy and flip and sell on land contract and rent houses, 5-10 years ago when the market was a little bit different. Now it's a little bit trickier to do that here. I bought tons of houses without doing a home inspection, and I've never had anything come up that was catastrophic. Certainly do a home inspection, but I think oftentimes it's more for information than, anything catastrophic that you're going to find. I've only had, in the 600 plus houses I've sold, only a couple of super surprising catastrophic issues that were revealed during the home inspection. We've actually seen more than a few condos with condition issues revealed by inspections, which was surprising me. Oh, that is interesting. Well, I guess Ian just contradicted me. Positively rate through the budget is key. Yeah. If it were competitive, I mean, Rick, it goes back to case by case. If it was competitive and it was in a condo development that I was familiar with, I'd probably be okay advising you not to do an inspection. If it was a condo in a town or a development that I had never been in before, maybe a little bit less likely. Yeah, that's a good response to that. Something else to consider when you talk about, and we're going to finish up here in a minute. So if you have any last minute questions, make sure you drop them in. I want to be respectful of your time. It seems like there's been a lot of you on tonight. This is the biggest turnout we've had. So maybe starting at 7:30 was a plus, maybe 7 o'clock's too early. So something to consider when moving here from another state is book your moving company early. There's a couple of great ones here. There's a couple of great ones nationwide. Make sure that, and a lot of times we're closing on the house. We just had one, somebody's moving here from Bellingham, Washington. They bought a house in downtown Petoskey. They just closed on it. We're holding on the keys, keep an eye on the house for them while they're not here. So, that is definitely something we will walk through when the time comes. But, coordinating from other states, making sure you have the mover lined up, making sure all of that, stuff is taken care of. That way you don't have any surprises at the last minute. Many times the budget will have a timeline for things on the roof. Yeah, so inspection may say needs a roof and budget says it's covered. Wasn't contradicting at all. Haha. No, I'm not worried about that. That is definitely something to consider for the inspections, is things like a roof. If it comes back and it says the roof has 5 or less years, you can probably negotiate some sort of credit. If it comes back and it says it has 10, roofs don't last forever. So again, a lot of this stuff is case by case. So I'm certain we can guide you through any of this. Let me know if any of this did any of this make sense? Did you learn anything, or do you have any questions? Whether you're watching this live or the replay, if you want to reach out to me directly after this, my cell phone is 231-330-4863. You can call or text me directly. I'd love to help you. If you do not have any more questions, I will see you next Thursday. Let's plan on 7:30. We'll keep this road going. It seemed like it was a good turnout tonight. Again, if you have not yet subscribed, it would mean the world to me if you would do so. We are closing in on 2,000, and that's been a goal of mine for a long time. I can't believe it's actually close. So thanks for spending your Thursday night with me, and we'll talk soon.